Hi, I'm Karin Hurt, and I'm here with our next edition of Asking for a Friend Live. A shout out to our executive producer, Jared Hur. I did not know that we were going to have all those new fun graphics to start the new year, so thank you so much. Today, I am absolutely delighted to invite Jess Pettitt, who is one of the best listeners that I know and is very, very skillful in helping other people have compassionate, inclusive conversations. She's the author of a book called Good Enough Now. And so, Jess, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I had to have you on the show when we were at that party the other day and we were talking and I was listening to you talk about some of this stuff that I thought, gosh, Jess really needs to be here because this is a topic that is happening every single day with all of the clients that we are working with. Listening is such an important skill, particularly now when everybody is so stressed out, burned out, tired, and tensions are high. So I want to start by just inviting you, and I'm going to ask this question of every one of our guests this year. What has been a source of strength or inspiration for you during this tricky time?
I know this isn't the probably expected answer. Like you're, as a comedian, I'm supposed to say like cheese or something, right? But because things are so tight and tense and brittle, I think David Brooks defined 2021 in an interview on PBS NewsHour as like a shapeless year, which I really resonated with me. I think what's really inspiring is that people are still trying to have challenging conversations, that there's still the struggle that of how do I do this? How do I do this? Instead of just like bouncing, I'm out, I'm not doing it anymore, right? Like we really have a tolerance level for the unknown, and that's really inspiring to me.
Nice. Thank you. So tell our listeners a little bit about your background. Why did you get so interested in this? Anything you think we should know before we jump into being helpful?
Well, I do love cheese, so that's important. I'm on a dairy-free situation right now, and I am relatively delightful still. That's important to know about me. How I got into this was basically I was raised by a family that always looked not just for the underdog, but I guess now I would have the vocabulary to say looking for hypocrisy. And I've always kind of just done extra without even meaning to do extra. I've done extra. But when you aren't afraid of doing extra and you're kind of trained to be looking for hypocrisy, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues have shown up my entire life. And I've had enough privilege and probably persistence to kind of hang in there and figure out, why is this hypocritical? What is this rooted in? And ultimately, why are we not being able to work or communicate across those differences, which really results into us just digging our heels in for what makes us feel safe and comfortable. So I am on a mission to expand people's ability to feel safe and comfortable, even when they don't know what they're doing. So like my mantra, right? Good Enough Now is the book, like you said, but the mantra is do the best you can with what you've got some of the time.
Nice.
And that, I think that's the answer to what I'm interested in and what I do for other people.
Okay, good. So let's get real basic to start. What does effective listening look like? Like, how do you know it when you see it? What are some of the essential skills?
Sure. So, when typical communication experts start talking about the difference between listening and hearing, I think that kind of it's a safe way of having the conversation. So my first whoa, that is not what I was expecting answer would be true listening means that you ask a question that you have no idea what the answer is going to be. None. No expectations, no guesses. You just ask a question and you fill that space with so much curiosity and generosity that you are waiting for that answer. Whatever that answer is, that's listening. And I think when you define it that way, it's much easier to notice, oh yeah, I'm not doing that. No.
That's really hard.
Yeah, right. And some of the time, right? It's better than nothing, never. But I believe if you can become conscious of when you are hearing and when you are transactionally listening versus when you are deeply present and listening, you can have a gear shift and you can know when you're doing it, but you're responsible for when you're doing what you're doing.
Can you give us some examples of some questions? To me, what I'm thinking, my mind immediately goes to what are the right kinds of questions that you could ask without that I might already know the answer to?
I mean, it works for anything, so like one of my biggest clients are in the hospitality industry. And so we often talk about, the common question is, can you tell me where the bathroom is? They have been asked that question 5 billion times.
Right.
And in training, you're supposed to answer it like it's the first time anyone's ever asked you where the bathroom is, right? Well, that gets really hard, right? And so then what ends up happening is you see the person approaching. They haven't even said anything yet, and you're like down the hall to the left, right? Now, for some, it's more discreet. It feels like customer service. There might not be anything wrong with that, but that might not be what they were going to ask you. Right. So then now you're in transactional mode. Okay, well, I'll wait for them to actually ask. So you see someone approaching and you want to say down the hall to the left. And instead they say, do you have vegan options? You're like that. Yes, we do. Here are the actions. Right. Like that's that. That's to me, transactional listening. Mm-hmm. So then when you get to this deeper thing, you would be like, hello, welcome. And then let the person fill in the gaps. Mm-hmm. You have all the time in the world for whatever their answer is going to be. Well, when you are a server at a restaurant, you do not have all the time in the world.
Right.
That is not available to you. So you're probably going to transactionally listen or hear more than you're actually deeply going to listen.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think sometimes people aren't prepared to answer those deeper questions right away either. I noticed myself asking this question a lot, which is, well, how can I be most helpful here? And sometimes that is a very hard question for people to answer, so that's, so then I think it's like, I just creating the space to let people catch up. Yeah.
But ultimately, that's why I think the work that you do is so important, right? Is that this isn't you don't learn a skill and update the software in your head and all of a sudden you're this deep listener forever, right? Like, I mean, if you ask my partner or my therapist, neither of them would describe me as a good listener, and you introduced me that way because it depends on the relationship and the context and the habits, which ultimately goes back to us feeling safe and prepared. Mm-hmm. And so when you are the master of the domain, you own this restaurant, if I keep using this as an example, when that is that case, then you can be a little bit more open because you ultimately have all the ability to help. Just real quick, another random example. There's a woman who is in an MBA program, and she was super nervous about starting school. So a common friend introduced us because I got my MBA inside COVID. What'd you do inside COVID? So I was like helping her or whatever. So she's in a program where she does a class at a time. I read a couple of her papers. Well, the holiday break happened, etc., and I hadn't heard from her. So I just sent her a text message yesterday. This is such a good example. Sent a text message to her yesterday. I don't know her, right? I'm just here to support her. And I was like, hey, I haven't heard from you. Just want to check in. How are you doing? I have no idea what's going on in her life. We're not like close friends, right? Are you still in school? Do you have a job? Are you sick? Did you drop out of school? Like, this could be a range of answers, right? Yeah. Who this? Well, I don't even have your cell phone number, lady. Like, all of those are options. And she responded, I took a class off. I lost my job last month, and my grandmother is really sick. If I was transactionally listening, I would hear, oh, not in school, doesn't need my help.
Right.
But instead I was like, oh no, do you want to talk about this? And they're like, no, I'm pretty good. Just thought I'd let you know. Sure. Great. Happy whatever day it was, Thursday. Mm-hmm. But then maybe like 10 minutes went by and they texted me again, like, thanks for reaching out. And I was like, it's the least I can do, right? I'm always here if you need me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see how that feels differently?
Yeah.
And I'm not doing it to be cool. I was genuinely curious. How's school going? But maybe there's not something with school. So I just said, how's it going?
Yes.
They
Yeah.
fill in the blanks.
Yeah, that's good. We had Deb Fine, a small talk expert, on the show, and she said, she asked, "Catch me up," and I love that. It's so easy, that you have no preconceived notions with "Catch me up." You don't know what you're going to get, and that gives people an opportunity to make choices about what they're sharing. So I love you talk about this concept of preconceived judgment, and you have a really deliberate approach to thinking about that. When you talk about margins and spaces, can you share a little bit about that? It's something that really stuck out for me in your writing.
Yeah, sure. So this is typically referred to as the way to monitor or take responsibility for the things that each of us, including me, do to feel safe and prepared. So I've mentioned that kind of line a couple times. So what am I talking about? So in order to feel safe and prepared, let's say you're getting ready to be interviewed on this really amazing live podcast called Asking for a Friend. You can watch some other episodes, etc. I chose a new lady sweater for you today. So you're making judgments and assumptions. Now, when we start talking about diversity work, one of the stupidest things we say is, oh, you're never supposed to make judgments and assumptions. But then that derails you when you realize you are doing it. You quitting somehow. There's nothing wrong with making judgments and assumptions. It's just what you do with them that might be problematic. So you're responsible for the ones that you make. Now, I believe I make the judgments and assumptions that we do so that we can feel safe and prepared as we move forward. But that doesn't mean we're accurate. And so what I suggest, and this is where the margins come in, is that go ahead, write your story with your judgments, your assumptions that your lived experience has taught you, oh, this is what's happening. Let's say you're perceiving what seems to be kind of a tense or hostile conversation in the conference room, and you haven't entered the conference room yet, right? So as you're getting ready to enter the conference room, you're going to be like, oh, Todd's being Todd again. Why are they even talking about this stuff at work? Blah, blah, blah. And you're going to walk in the room feeling safe and prepared for how you're entering the room, even though you have no knowledge of what's actually happening. Your lived experience is informing that, right? So that's what I mean by writing a story, but you're writing that story as a draft, triple space, extra wide margins. So then you enter the conference room, and then like a draft, you are actively seeking edits to your story. So I call it leave room for edits, because you are responsible for the draft that you walked in there with. And maybe Todd's not picking on people. Maybe Todd's disclosing something that was really personal to him, because that kind of tension can also look like a different kind of tension. But you don't know until you get there. But you don't lead by bossing Todd around, because you don't even know what's going on, right? So by leaving room for edits, you're responsible for the first draft, and you're curious and generous and awaiting an update to your draft to become more accurate. That to me is active listening, so that you can get aware of what you need to feel safe and prepared, but also what do you need in this given situation, because they might not be the same thing.
Yeah, I love that. I as I was reading that, I thought, gosh, I can just in the last week think of at least 7 different circumstances, whether if I or someone I care about had showed up that way, it would have made a difference. So that's really good.
When I remember in driving school, right, is that when there's an aggressive driver, instead of why are you in such a hurry, road rage, blah, 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 right? That's sometimes where we go, somebody in the car is giving birth. They're in a hurry. Right? Or I was in a really long line at my vet's office, which because of COVID protocols means you're standing out in the rain, and was very annoying. And we're all in line and we're all silent. And I just decided, what if everybody in line is putting their animal down today? Shut up. What are you in a bad mood about? I'm picking up a prescription. I'm lucky. It's beautiful outside. Who doesn't like a nice rain? Shut up. Just go. But whatever story you write can affect how you begin to listen to other people, and then leave room for edits. So go ahead. I cut you off.
No, you didn't. And then you have one other, I mean, I'm sure you have many sound bites, but you have another sound bite that I think is really good. It's an assumption. Assume that the other person is
right.
Is wise, right? Didn't you say?
Oh, listening to, yeah, I didn't. So it's
Did I
funny.
get it wrong?
Yeah, it's close. It's close. So listening to others as if they're wise.
Listening to others as if they are wise.
Right.
Yeah.
So example, let's take Todd in the conference room.
Yep.
Todd knows what Todd is talking about. You don't, because you are not in the conference room. Now, let's say Barb sent you a text message from inside the conference room and said, Todd's at his thing again. Mm-hmm. Right. That doesn't even mean Barb is right.
Right.
Because Barb is responding out of habit, probably too. Can you enter that conference room and listen to find out what Todd knows about what Todd is doing before you respond? You know, so the example I use a lot are with children. Now, I am not a parent. So one of the things I really am clear about is that as a non-parent, I am not giving parental advice. But my parent friends often call me for advice. So I'm just kind of going from one of those conversations. I have to clarify because I don't want people coming for you. I have dogs, not children. And it's because I'm not brave enough. Like this is not a default. Anyway, so two of my friends have a son, Zach. And during Zoom school, Zach didn't do his math homework. And so his two moms were going to punish him for not doing his math homework. And the punishment was that he wasn't going to get to go to a birthday party over the weekend. And the kid's response was, yes! Which the moms went and hid in the pantry and called me and was like, that did not go as planned. This was supposed to be a punishment. Kid's really happy. What am I supposed to do here? So I said, well, what are all the reasons that would make your kid happy to not go to a Zoom birthday party? First off, let's start with it's a Zoom birthday party,
right?
You're welcome. You're welcome. You don't have to go, right? And they're like, no. He really wanted to go, and he just didn't take it right. He's just being contrary. And I was like, well, that's also an option. What if something's happening that actually makes him excited he doesn't have to go, short of it's a Zoom birthday party? Pick a better punishment. And they said, oh, no, we know everything about Zach's life. And I was like, first off, that is some helicopter parenting. Second off, you obviously don't.
Right.
So can you listen to Zach in a way that Zach knows something that you don't know? And if you want to know what Zach knows that you don't know, here's a good place to start. So what matters? That he responds to a punishment correctly, that he does his math homework, or that you have a connection? This is where better connections come in. You have a connection with your son in a way that he feels that he can talk to you. And they're like, well, of course, that's what matters. And I'm like, great. Well, then put the other stuff aside. You were wrong. Now go listen to Zach. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that the person whose birthday party it was is an online bully and was bullying Zach and the other kids, and he didn't want to go to his birthday party. Well, now you're excited that Zach doesn't want to go to the birthday party. Right. And the better connection is actually what mattered.
Right.
That's hearing, transactional listening, and actually deeply caring listening.
All right, good. So let's go to some of the hard stuff, because so one of the things that I hear a lot,
Karin, some people are like, this is already hard.
So I've got this team and I'm the leader, and I got anti-vaxxers who are passionate. I've got, for God's sakes, why don't people just go get their vaccine so I can go resume a normal life? I've got Black Lives Matter advocates. I've got people who say all lives matter. And I'm thinking, I just would like to shut down this conversation so we can get back to work. I hear that question. That's probably 20 times in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
What would you say to that leader?
All right. So first thing I would say to the leader is shutting down these conversations is not listening. Like, you're prioritizing get back to work, whatever that means. And that says a lot about your management and leadership style. You are welcome to make those choices. I wouldn't want to work for you. So if you're going to take that option off the table, these elements are in the workplace. So now what do? You will not be able to extract them, in my opinion, because these elements are deeply important and personal to the person that is holding them. Now, without taking up too much of your time, because I want to manage your live show time, there is a Cliff Notes answer is that there are individuals and there are groups. And often we look at the people that we disagree with as a group. And we look at the people that we do agree with as a group. And then individually, we want to be seen as an individual. Right? Like just trust me, that's a thing. So then let's take Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter as an example. So, and all I do is talk about these kind of controversial things because they're not that controversial. For the first part, of course, all lives matter. Of course, that is a true thing. And people like me who support Black Lives Mattering, we're just trying to point out that they seem to matter differently than other types of lives. We're like literally trying to point out that lives are valued differently. So the conversation when you say, well, is that you are not agreeing that lives are not valued differently. So then to truly be reflective is I would challenge you, do you value all living things the same? Cliff Notes, the answer is no, you don't. Okay, so now you're responsible for that stratification. And this side is just pointing out a stratification that is actually getting them killed. That's it. So I have diffused the tension because I'm taking it from what could this mean? And then how do I take responsible for wherever it is that I stand there, right? Mm-hmm. Flip it back to vaccines, anti-vaxxers, vaxxers, etc. This is dividing my own family up. I may have lost my brother forever because I put a microchip in my arm 3 times. Great. So first, as a group, it is important for me to remember that not all anti-vaxxers, I'm using air quotes, not all anti-vaxxers are what I would consider not really paying attention to how like science works. Some people who can't get vaccines are pregnant or have some kind of immune compromised situation where they can't get vaccinated. I have to be careful to not lump them all together. Mm-hmm. Some people are pro-vaccines and can't get it or just haven't gotten it for some reason. Flip side, there are people who got the vaccine who didn't really want it, but they had to in order to stay employed. Mm-hmm. It's my job to listen and figure out what are the complexities instead of just me swooping everything into groups. Mm-hmm. Now, you asked specifically about, well, these things are happening at work and leaders and supervisors and managers need to know what to do. I cannot tell you how to fix other people. It does not work that way. But what I can tell you is to sit back and listen with curiosity and generosity and vulnerability and authenticity. Where do you show up in these arguments? Where can you see an understanding of what is possibly being lumped together into a group? Mm-hmm. And then if you have the authority or power within your organization, take a stance. And if you take a stance, that means you run the risk of losing people. But you are creating a workplace culture that says this is what we believe in. And if this is what we believe in, then those are the people who should be working there. And those people that are working there will continue to work there because they have that in common, and you will lose people who do not.
And when you say take a stance, I imagine it's take a stance of around here, we can have these productive conversations and talk about them with compassion and empathy, not so much take a stance because, I believe everybody should be vaccinated. If your corporate policy says that's not necessary, as a team leader, that might be too much of a stance.
I know. So this is the gray area, but no, I actually mean the second one, right? Mm-hmm. So if you own the company or you have the power and privilege to actually make a protocol like that, then do it. And what ends up happening is we get a little nervous, we get a little puckery, and then we're like waiting for someone else to tell us what to do because we're not actually using the power and privilege we have to decide what we want to do, even though everyone under us is looking to us. So everyone under us is looking at us go, I don't know, I'm going to wait till we federally mandated or mandated by the state to do something. Right? That's not a strong leader, and you're not listening. You're waiting to be told what to do. Now, there are also times to do that. And maybe the most authentic thing you could do is to say, you know what? I don't know how to take a stand on this.
We're going to wait and see. Yeah.
We're going to wait and see. At least everyone who works for you knows that. And people who are like, no, great, go get another job. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a lot of privilege to go find another job. but at least there's clarity. Organizations hired me a lot to write like their response statement after George Floyd's murder or Black Lives Matter. I have to write all these response statements. And almost always they are only doing it because a competitor has one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. What does your organization believe in? Well, I don't know. This has nothing to do with work. Well, then I'm not writing you a statement.
Mm-hmm.
Because these things mean things.
Yeah.
And if you haven't been self-reflective enough as to why you are saying what you are saying, one, you're not communicating, you're not leading, you're not managing, you're not supervising, and you're certainly not listening.
Mm-hmm. All right, I want to give you one more, and then I'm going to go to your very best piece of advice. So if you had to sum up one piece of advice for 2022 for folks. But my other one, because this is another one that comes up very consistently, we do a process that we call a listening tour with people who are in our leadership programs, where they go out and they're asking people for feedback and we teach them how to listen to that. Some of the time, people are surprised that the feedback that they hear is that they are not a good listener.
Mm-hmm.
And so suppose somebody's coming to you and they're like, I just did Karin and David's listening tour and I'm told I'm not a good listener. Where do I start? What would you say there?
Yeah. So this is actually, I have a handout about this.
Okay.
So page 192 in the book, if you're following along at home.
Jerry, can we bring up the handout?
Yeah. They'll link to the handout as well, I think. Yeah. So when someone tells you you are not a good listener, there's a lot of reasons why that might be happening. And it might be because you're not listening in that moment. It might be that you're trying to win the conversation or at least make them lose. You're trying to be right and you're trying to make them wrong. You get to decide, because being a bad listener happens a lot of those times. When I show up as a bad listener, it is usually because I've dug my heels in because I am right and you are wrong. And that breaks down the deeper level of listening. So this flow chart is when you are about to be in one of those moments, you're going to ultimately decide, I want to make a better connection, not be right, not win, or make them wrong and them lose. I just want to make a better connection with this person. Then you're going to decide what's the format that you're going to use. Is it an email? Is it a text? Is it an actual conversation? What are you going to do? So that's the intentional conversation that you're having with the outcome of being a better connection. Next step, don't speak. You're listening. Now, as an extrovert, I listen through sonar sometimes, right? But you need to listen to the person that you're trying to engage with and see how they are showing up and how they're responding. Are they in a particular mood? How are they doing? What's their history with the subject that you're about to bring up? Listening to them as if they know them, or listening to them as if they have answers to questions that you don't have, allows you to then form a message that is clear on the intended meaning of that message. It doesn't mean it's going to work, but you're at least able to be 100% responsible of what that message is and what that intention is. I said 100%. So a therapist stay in business because it's 50%. But I mean, how would you communicate differently if you were 100% responsible for whatever happens? When you are comfortable being 100% responsible, then you release the Kraken. That's when you send the email or do the statement or have the conversation, whatever you need to do. Then regardless of what happens, you can claim responsibility for it because you did before you even said it. Mm-hmm. You know you're doing this because you're not backtracking or being defensive when the other person has a different impact than you intended. You can be like, oh, interesting. I wouldn't have had that response. Oh, interesting is not defensive. Oh, interesting is curious. When you can claim or reclaim, because sometimes it's a repeat habit, the responsibility for the impact of their message, then you can make meaning of how this conversation went. And then ultimately, how is the impact with my connection with this person? Is it better? Is it neutral? Or is it worse? That is making a better connection. If you go through this process, even in text messaging or emails, it will be challenging for someone to call you a bad listener. Mm. The downside is that you would have to do this for every sentence you exchange. So odds are you're not going to do that. So then I know that I need to work on my listening skills, right? So I've done a ton of research on it, and I am still working on my listening skills. That's being responsible for the times that I show up as a good or a bad listener. That's what responsibility means in this context.
Perfect. All right. As we close, I'm going to ask you for one piece of advice for the 2022 that we are seeing in front of us. What is your best piece of leadership advice?
it seems cliche, but do not underestimate who the person is and what they are dealing with that is standing next to you or that you're about to engage with. Do not underestimate what the last 2 years, last 3 years, last 20 years have done to that person, and allow them to show up the way that they are showing up.
Beautiful. Jess, thank you so much for being our guest on Asking for a Friend. I loved your insights. I look forward to talking with you again soon.
Absolutely.
So we have a fantastic lineup coming ahead. And so I want to share with you a little bit of that. We have Colin Hunter, who's going to talk about being more wrong. And then Heather Younger is going to be talking about the art of caring leadership. Whitney Johnson talking about her new book and smart growth. And Julie Winkle-Giulioni, she's been a guest before, but she's got another great new book coming out about promotions, and promotions are so yesterday. So hope you will join us on our coming edition of Asking for a Friend.